Chapter 5. Jackson came into the fellowship hall Wednesday night and headed straight for the chair next to Pete. Pete's eyebrows raised at this rare, voluntary contact, but he still offered Jackson a polite, "Hey, how's it going?" as if they hadn't been avoiding each other for the past month. "I'm fine." Jackson was only a few minutes early to Bible study, so he needed to get straight to the point. "The school where you teach, is it a good one?" Pete adjusted his glasses. "It's the best in the county. Why?" "I have a friend whose son really needs somewhere to go for kindergarten next year. Would it be free?" "Yeah, we get federal funding for our students. We have a long waiting list, but as a faculty member, I may have a little pull." "I promise there would be no one more deserving than these two." "In that case, let me see if I can get your friend an application." Jackson shook Pete's hand vigorously. "Thank you. I really appreciate this. I think the mom might be coming to the fall festival, so maybe she can chat with you there." "Sure thing." Ava stuck an eager head around her boyfriend's shoulder. "Would this mom be Kaleigh?" To Ava's left, Jess Wilson also poked her head in Jackson's direction. "Who's Kaleigh?" Jackson looked down at his smartwatch. "Wow, is it 7 already?" he called out loud enough for Pastor Thomas to hear. The older man startled and cleared his throat. "Let's begin in Romans chapter 11. Jackson pulled the chapter up on his phone, and the pastor asked, "Jackson, would you please read verses 15 and 16 aloud?" Jackson cleared his throat. He didn't get nervous over much, but reading scripture in front of even a handful of church members was way outside his comfort zone. He shifted in his chair and brought the screen close to his face, steadying his shaking elbows on the plastic table in front of him. "For he saith to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. So then, it is not of him that willeth, nor of him that runneth, but of God that showeth mercy." "Thank you." Pastor Thomas nodded in his direction, and Jackson exhaled. He had jumped off cliffs and parasailed over the ocean, but being called out in this crowd sure could make him sweat. He skimmed over the words again, since in the moment before, he'd been more focused on speaking than listening. "Have any of you ever felt like you were running through life? Like you wanted something so bad, you'd climb any mountain or enter any race to get there?" A few people raised their hands. I think most of us can relate to that feeling, but God doesn't think like us, does he? Across the table, a man whose name Jackson hadn't learned yet curved his lips into a knowing smirk. Jackson wasn't in on the joke, however. In his mind, he echoed Pastor Thompson's question. Does he? Sometimes we can wish and work so hard that we think God is going to look down and grant us anything we want. The truth is that what we really need is to be still and trusting that he already knows what he's doing. Pastor Thomas's words ran contrary to everything Jackson had been taught. His dad had taught him that without ambition, he was nothing, so he should work as hard as he could to get money and respect. God knew what he was doing when he called each of you to be here tonight. He has been compassionate to us, the undeserving. So how can we think less of ourselves, of our abilities, even of our failures, and start leaning more on him? Isaac Wilson piped up, "We can do good for others, even when it doesn't benefit us." When it doesn't benefit us. Jackson felt like he was so far away from what this book taught. He tried to take Isaac's advice to talk to Kaleigh softly, but now he had to step it up and question his own motivations. Kaleigh kept accusing him of trying to get something from their relationship, of not being truly committed. The accusations grated when, for the first time in his life, he was only trying to do right by someone. But would he really be okay if, at the end of her volunteer hours, she didn't want to spend time with him again? Pastor Thomas had called the circle of people gathered there the undeserving. As Jackson looked around the room at teachers, nurses, and loving parents, he knew that undeserving was not the label he would choose to attach to any of the members. But if Pastor Thomas lumped them all together as being unable to earn God's love by their own strength, maybe Jackson wasn't as left out as he felt. Maybe, by God's mercy, there could be a way for him to change, to become like them and the other Christians he'd been reading about. The heroes in the Bible didn't seem to be the traditional, swaggering red cape types. He racked his brain for the name. John the Baptist even ran around in camel hair and leather. Yet Jesus called him the greatest prophet of all. Jackson sure had a lot to learn about God's way of thinking. If only he could learn enough to be strong and steady for Kaleigh. He hoped to continue making strides starting next Wednesday at the hospital. The morning of her third volunteer shift, Kaleigh found it easier to leave Aaron with Jackson in the hospital cafeteria. Last time, Aaron raved about their time together. Her nerves today had more to do with her own performance. During the previous week's observation, Kaleigh had followed Dr. Reynolds to 2 patient sessions. She tried to take notes, but honestly, she didn't know what she was supposed to be taking note of. Despite taking a basic anatomy class in high school, she hadn't learned enough about the muscles the therapist was working on to be able to know what she was watching. She only nodded as Dr. Reynolds spat out the names of the different exercises and shook her head when the doctor asked if she had any questions. It was so over her head she didn't know what questions to ask. Mrs. Clemens, who Kaleigh learned was called a medical support assistant, directed Kaleigh to the office that Dr. Reynolds shared with a few other therapists. The office smelled of freshly brewed coffee. Dr. Reynolds wore baby pink scrubs today and was peering at x-rays on a screen when Kaleigh arrived. She looked up and smiled. "Hi there." "Hi. Have a seat." She gestured to a vacant chair beside her and typed one last notation on the computer before closing out the image. "I wanted to touch base with you about our last visit. Did you learn a lot?" Kaleigh swallowed. "Mm-hmm." Dr. Reynolds threw her head back. Her laugh tinkled like fairy bells. "That's what I thought." She scooted her desk chair closer to Kaleigh's and rested her elbows on her knees. "I remember what it was like to be a student observer, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth." Kaleigh snorted. The doctor looked no older than 40, but she appreciated the attempt to make her feel comfortable. Dr. Reynolds continued, "It can be overwhelming. I thought you might like some advice today, now that my schedule's not so slammed." The tension left Kaleigh's shoulders. "That would be great." Learning how to diagnose and treat the patient is critical, of course, but it's just as important to learn how to approach the patient. Oh. The doctor was talking about people skills, which were not exactly Kaleigh's strong suit. Apparently, Dr. Reynolds' shrewd eyes hadn't missed Kaleigh's reluctance to approach the patients. "I didn't want to overstep," Kaleigh hedged. "Well, today, overstep." Awesome, Kaleigh thought. Evidence that sarcasm came to her as naturally as blinking. This was going to be a challenge. Kaleigh's main positive interactions these days included conversations about horses and construction vehicles. There was nothing tough about being approachable to a kid. In conversations with adults, however, she preferred a less is more approach. That had certainly been safer whenever she talked to Lana. And last week at Hydrangea, when Kaleigh had basically spilled her life story to Jackson, the slip had made her feel unnervingly out of control. But if Kaleigh needed to open up more to be a therapist's assistant, then that's what she was going to do. Mrs. Clemens popped her head in the doorway. "Mr. Meyer is ready for you." "Thanks, Jeannie." Dr. Reynolds stood, and Kaleigh followed suit. "Our first appointment today is with Richard Meyer. We've been working to decrease the pain in his shoulder." She plucked up her aqua clipboard and led Kaleigh to room 3 near the end of the hall. After a brief knock, Dr. Reynolds opened the door to reveal an older man slouched on the examination table. His hair shined dark silver, and his brown eyes brimmed with antagonism. Kaleigh held back another snort. "I'm supposed to act all warm and fuzzy with this guy?" She constructed what she hoped was a friendly smile, but his gaze was fixed on the doctor. He crossed his arms. "I'm here," he said. "Let's get this over with." Glancing over her notes, Dr. Reynolds' voice was chipper. "Okay, it looks like we're due for some shoulder strengthening. I'll be right back with a dowel rod." She pivoted back toward the door. "Kaleigh, why don't you keep Mr. Meyer company for a moment, and I'll be right back." Kaleigh wondered if Dr. Reynolds had truly forgotten the dowel rod or if she just carefully constructed a trial by fire. She hoped her panic didn't show on her face. "So," Kaleigh started, "what brings you here?" "My son's nagging," he spat. "Okay, let's try a different approach," Kaleigh thought. "What do you like to do in your spare time?" "People enjoy talking about their interest, right?" "Wrong." Mr. Meyer leaned close, as if revealing a secret. "I like to come to the hospital, aggravate my aching shoulder, and talk with a nosy teenage girl." He yanked his phone out of his plaid shirt pocket to check the time. Kaleigh balled up her hands on her hips. "I'm 22, and too tough to be discouraged by the likes of you." With a deep breath, Kaleigh reminded herself to be gentle. After all, people often accused her of being heartless when she was simply slow to trust. Kaleigh caught a glimpse of the logo on Mr. Meyer's phone case, glad that Lana's second boyfriend had been obsessed with baseball. It took her a second to recall the team name. "You're a Mariners fan, huh?" "Yeah," he groused. "Do you want me to put a game on TV while you wait?" The cantankerous man didn't answer directly, but a casual shrug of his shoulders told her she'd hit her mark. After she found the correct channel, Kaleigh didn't fill the room with any more chatter. Instead, she sat down in one of the guest chairs and watched the game with him until Dr. Reynolds reappeared, rod in hand. Kaleigh hopped to her feet and took notes as Dr. Reynolds guided Mr. Meyer through a series of exercises. She knew she wasn't writing down the correct terminology, but tried to at least record a summary of the therapist's different techniques. Most of the time, Mr. Meyer was able to keep his attention on the TV, but one stretch seemed to be more difficult for him. The doctor placed her fingers lightly on the top of the dowel rod, as he wasn't pushing at the correct angle with his left hand. The increased rotation caused his right shoulder to tremble, and tiny beads of sweat glistened on his temples. Dr. Reynolds relieved him after a few seconds. "Go ahead and rest." "Did Brandon install your pulley?" Mr. Myers grumbled. "He did all right, and he's been on me to use it too." "Good." Dr. Reynolds smiled. Kaleigh figured, based on Mr. Myers' previous complaint, that Brandon was his son. She was impressed that, despite seeing dozens of patients every day, Dr. Reynolds was able to remember his name. "All right," Dr. Reynolds said. "Great job. I'll see you next week." Mr. Myers grunted, but he gave Kaleigh a brisk nod before they left the room. Dr. Reynolds' eyebrows lifted. Once they were far enough down the hallway, she said, "Well done." Kaleigh mumbled, "I didn't do much," but her insides lifted with the praise. She was glad now that Dr. Reynolds had stepped out and forced her to be on her own. Kaleigh had begun the PTA path because it seemed like the most logical option. She liked athletics, needed decent benefits, and couldn't spend forever in college. But for the first time, Kaleigh envisioned herself working with the patients, enjoying the job instead of simply showing up for the paycheck. She could find out what they needed, even if it was just a smile on their face. She found that she looked forward to meeting Dr. Reynolds' next patient.